Back to Razmafsar TV. Welcome back to Razmafsar TV. Today I'm going to talk about why Shamshirs, or most Shamshirs, do not have a hand protection. I have already addressed this on this channel, but I would like to go more in detail and talk about it from an academic point of view. I'm going to put forward some hypotheses, the way we do it in academic publication, as I'm writing a new book as well on Persian swordsmanship with much more details, which will be published soon. But for now, I would like to go and show you why the hand, or there is no hand guard in a Shamshir. I mean, there is a cross guard. Saying that there is no hand guard for Shamshir is completely wrong. What we can say that do not have a hand guard is Sasanian sword, or Caucasian shashka, or shushke as we say it in Persian. But Persian Shamshir has a cross guard. Some of them are really wide, so there is a cross guard. But then the question for us is, why not more protection? This can also be said about different types of other swords. You can come and say, well, a long sword has also a cross guard, but the cross guard in general on European swords is much wider. And why on a Japanese katana or wakizashi or a Chinese dao, the disc protection is not that big? I mean, these are all the problems, as I say, the problems of transferring from one system, one fighting system to the other. Let me just give you one example why transferring is wrong. I remember having been in martial arts almost all my life, started as a small kid. I remember when full contact karate came into, and people started to do full contact karate later on, American version of kickboxing without low kicks. Many people from traditional martial arts, such as karate, kung fu, and so, went into the boxing ring and tried to fight against the boxer. And back then, because in American style of kickboxing, no low kicks or knees were allowed, you had to box the Western way because the rules determined the way you fought. Of course, when you add elbows, when you add knees, when you also add low kicks, the nature of the fight changes. Everyone, as much as I love boxing, and I also boxed for many years, still, and I also, when I went to university in Germany, in Gießen, I used to have a kickboxing school. As much as I love boxing, the problem of transferring is then you would think that, well, the way, for example, the traditional martial arts such as karate punch is not effective. It's not effective in which system? When Machida came and then piston-shaped punches, both Machida, him and himself, and Machida, and also his younger brother, we saw that how effectively they could integrate karate punching in MMA. So I'm not saying boxing, Western boxing is not important for MMA, but you see, they introduced a different style of punching when other elements of fighting systems were there. So transferring is not a right idea to do, but we need just to look at it, at the weapon in its own context. Having said that, I based my studies on different Bazubands, and also I have analyzed in museums and published them, and also going to talk about Persian miniatures, the way Bazubands are depicted. You see that, for example, they're all Bazubands, as you can see them here, without hand protection. Then the question is, why hand is left unprotected? Is it an artistic convention, or is it on purpose? And you see that here there is a hands protection there, as you can see it. But let us go and see that. I've actually more than that. I have double as many hypotheses as here, but for this video, I put forward 7 of my hypotheses. Hypothesis number 1, Persian and Iranian warriors left their hand unprotected. I can come and also make it a null hypothesis, right? But we are not working with null hypothesis. We're going to work with our hypothesis, positive way. And hypothesis 2, the arm was protected by steel plates of a Bazuband. Hypothesis 3, the hand was protected by Bazuband. Hypothesis 4, there was a separate hand protection. Hypothesis 5, the unprotected hand is difficult to hit as it is protected by the shield. Hypothesis 6, the unprotected hand is difficult to hit as the arm is never stretched and the cuts are done with bent elbows at all times, the so-called draw cuts. And hypothesis 7, battlefield fighting arts differ from dueling. Again, I have 14 so far, but I will only talk about 7. So hypothesis 1, Persian and Iranian warriors left their hand unprotected. Let's go and see if this can be substantiated by pictorial evidence and with also extant examples of arms and armor. I'm going to show you only antiques. I would like to tell everyone here, never ever base your analysis on newly made swords. Newly made swords and reproductions are good for modern fencing or historical fencing, but they're never ever the real deal. So let's go through them. The hypothesis 1, Persian and Iranian warriors left their hand unprotected. Interestingly, when you come and look at Tarikh Jahangoshay Naderi, you see that it is true. Some of them, as you can see, are holding, or excuse me, are having a Bazuband, but without a hand protection. You see that typical Bazuband with wrist protection and forearm protection is there. He is also wearing a mail armor and charine. And this is, he's wearing, most probably, as we say, Gajokand or Jezerent, or if, which means that there is a gambeson, and in between layers there is mail. Most probably he's wearing it. Gajokand, as we say in Persian, Jezerent, as people say in English-speaking countries. Gajokand is the real term. But even if it's a khaftan, they used to wear really khaftan with different layers. Some of them were also felt, not easy to cut, or even not as easy as people think to trust. But let's say he's wearing gajokand. I use the real Persian term. Still, the hand is unprotected, the same as it's here. You see that? Tarikh Jahangoshay Naderi is famed for different paintings and miniatures, and they're famed for depicting as realistically as possible arms and armor, and also horses, and also depictions of the whole surroundings and area. Less conventions, but depicting what happened on the battlefield. That's what Tarikh Jahangoshay Naderi, the world conquest of Nader, is famed for. You see in other ones, this one from also from Timurid period, you see, okay, he's using the gores. Here you can see also Shamshir sword fighters. You see that also Bazuband, protecting his forearm, but left the hand unprotected. I remember in an interview with John Clemens said something years ago on my channel, something very interesting. In his opinion, in many, not everywhere, of course, in many of the paintings of medieval combat, also Renaissance, where even with longsword or others, you see that the left, even if they had armor in other parts, I'm not saying they didn't use gauntlets. Of course, they used it in dueling. He was talking about battlefield. His opinion was, even if you wear a gauntlet, I'm not talking about dueling, it will change the nature of the way you move. So then they said they were so good in protecting their hands, be it with the long sword, that actually that cross guard or hand guard was not as relevant as people think it was. If it was so that's what he said, that's what they left it unprotected. We will come back to this point later on. It might have been the case as well as one hypothesis. You see that also in others, he has the same thing. You see that the Shamshir is raised above his شمشیر هوا کردن. One stage, one step before شمشیر به فرق زدن, to cut the top of the head with the شمشیر. So you see that it's unprotected. But there are miniatures that show that use and corroborates the hypothesis number one, that at least some Persian warriors left the hand unprotected. You go to hypothesis number two. The arm was protected by steel plates of a Bazuband. If we have seen it before, we have examples. Now, this one, as you can see, we have also a very, very similar example. This is from the Zand period, made of rhino hide, right? Also, we have examples of them helmets made of rhino hide. I analyzed the ones which are in of Charaine made of rhino hide from the Zand period, and also Bazuband, which are kept in the Military Museum of Iran in the Sadawat Palace complex. These are published in my book, Arms and Armor from Iran. So now we can go here and I show you this, when you look at this in the miniatures, you see that they had Bazubands with no hand protection, but only forearm protection. This at least resembles them. Because had it had a hand protection, there would be some, like at least in some examples, I will come back to this point as well, some holes in it, because they are normally, not on all cases, normally attached to the hand protection via rings, mostly riveted rings. So it could be that it didn't have it, but I will come back to it, or it could be that the mittens or the hand protection were separate. But you see that this one also corroborates. The arm was protected. This is from Al-Qarashi collection, which will be published in a new book I'm writing, second volume on Mr. Al-Qarashi's collection from Kuwait. You see that it's the same. There are no holes in it here. You see also here from Hermitage Museum, where I analyzed and worked with my colleagues, Dr. Elena and the rest, same thing. See that? No holes. But the forearms were protected. So, hypothesis, as you can see, so we have also in hypothesis two evidence in miniatures. So you see that, for example, they were protected. You can come and on this one argue that this one is already a hand protection. Excuse me, yes, a hand protection, like a small mitten. So it's at least indicating. But anyhow, you're in hypothesis one saying that the arm was protected, like this one's. You see that this is the case here. Here you see from the Qajar period as well. The wrist and the forearm is protected, right? You see that here as well. Before you say, oh, it's not a sword, well, we come back here and see that from the same Shahnameh, you see that the Iranian warriors are using, and wrist is protected with the Shamshir, is in high guard, you see, and Bazuband is protecting both hands. So those of you who say, oh, there was only one Bazuband, actually, real deals were always two Bazubands. No, irrespective if you had the shield or not. It's important because the shield always works in conjunction with the Bazuband, especially the small shields. It's also something you need to take into consideration. It's looks like a mushroom, and both you can also defend effectively with the steel plate. You see that here also from Al-Amari Shah Ismail, from Shah Ismail period, the Safavid period manual manuscript. We see that sword is here, and the hands are left unprotected, but the forearms and wrists are protected by Bazuband. So again, hypothesis number two. I show you another one. So you see that it corroborates and confirms the hypothesis number two, that the arm was protected by steel plates of a Bazuband. You can see all these miniatures in my book, Persian Archery and Swordsmanship. Again, if you go to Tarikh Jahangoshahi Nadiri, the world conquest of Nader, you see the same thing. They're wearing, mail armor sometimes in conjunction with charine, and also all these guys' helmet. And as you can see, okay, there are two put next to each other. You see that here, as you can see that here, yes, they are having also some of the charine in it. The hands are left unprotected. But then the arm was protected by steel plates of a Bazuband. You see it here as well. But here already a mitten is there. You see that here? But we come back to this point later. Hypothesis number 3, the hand was protected by Bazuband. Okay, we could come back here and talk about that, but I have better examples. Most Bazubands I have seen are of this type. This is from Bandar Anzali, military museum from Bandar Anzali, which I analyzed in Iran and published in my book Arms and Armor from Iran. It's a riveted mail, beautiful Safavid period one, and you see that they're connected. You see that there are holes here. Okay, there are two types. Well, some of them are two smaller steel plates connected via rings here, and a large plate. You see that from Hermitage Museum, the same one, and these are chiseled on the surface, the same style. Riveted mail, as you can see. But then look, it's not only riveted mails. Here is a thick gambeson and felt. That's what it protects. Let me just share something, how protective these are. I was using the same one of these reproduction made by Sergei Gobatko and with Petra, and she came with full force with an axe. Okay, it was of course not sharpened, for fighting axe for training, and she was supposed to hit me on the. She gave me tabar bar farsadan, supposed to hit me in that direction on top of my hand. So I defended with my shield, but then it came full force on my hand, my sword hand actually, but I didn't feel anything. Although this tabar, of course, is unsharpened one, has a bludgeoning effect, but it was completely dispersed. Just to mention that to you, because I was wearing it. It's very beautiful, also chiseled, but again. From Mr. Al-Qarashi, you see that here now. Please take a look at that. Do you remember what I said? Some of them, you see that there are some holes, but these holes were connected to this felt area, and these felt areas are connected here. You see, so not all of them are connected like this one in Military Museum of Tehran, which the rings go inside, which I prefer actually. But some of them are also connected to this gambeson protection of the hand mittens, and then this one goes there. The hand was also protected at least by some Bazubands. Now, some of them here, I'm going to show you Iranian examples of that later on as well in my upcoming book. This is an Ottoman example, which have a Joshan concept. It's from Hermitage Museum, which has also steel plates integrated into the hand. Now look at this miniature. You can see that the hand is clearly protected, right? You see, this is the plate here with mail armor here connected, right? But this is like a complete plate, right? See, here as well. See that? Very beautiful. There are two types of, also you can see it in my books of Persian ones. Some of them have one large plate, one smaller plate, which is connected by hinges, are hinged. Some of them are with rings. Now, this one is hinged, right? This one is with rings, right? And 3 plates. Anyhow, then hypothesis number 4. So there was a separate hand protection. So the separate hand protection was, we have it from Sasanian period in the Archaeology Museum of Mainz. And you can see that back then, very old from Sasanian period, that the separate hand protection, okay, you can come and argue these like rivet hands which were found, possibly were also attached to something made of gambeson or to protect the wrist and the arm or forearms, and they were dispersed. Maybe they had some steel plates or iron plates, but anyhow, the hand which is the protect gauntlet, one of the earliest gauntlets used by Sasanian. You can see it here. You can see examples of them. That's what I mean. Maybe these were here. You can see the Caucasian region. This is from Hermitage Museum. They had this steel Bazuband protecting the forearm, and on top of it, so these ones came over the Bazuband, and they were attached with cords, leather cords, and then they had this riveted ring mail to protect the hands. So this corroborates these two, that some of them at least had separate hand protection. Another hypothesis, again, you see that in most cases, people had Bazuband. And then, so there was at least forearm protection. Some of them show hand protection, some of them don't. Some of them, the hand protection is separated, some of them is integrated. But important is forearms always work. Never forget that. Forearms are protected. If the forearms were not protected, we're talking about the battlefield, right? This is a different story, right? The hypothesis number 5 is the unprotected hand is difficult to hit as it is protected by the shield. This is a very interesting one, and I think it depends on the context. Let me just explain. These are from the Rome Castle, excavated Roman arms and armor from a museum close to Frankfurt. You can see it here as well. You can watch them videos on it on my channel. These are like, Sparta and then Gladius and the rest of them, also Pugio and also the shield, also the shield boss here. Many of them are there, but important is, as you can see, also on Roman statutes, that the hand were left unprotected. So the question was, the scutum was so big and so large that there was no need to protect the hand, so they left it unprotected, so they could thrust with the sword, with the gladius, whatever, and thrust, and sometimes cut. Mostly they trusted. They used it to trust. There was no need to protect. You see, then later on, in the so-called, which the most transfers happen because of these, 133, the sword and buckler, and you see that they mostly bring the shield to protect the hands. And this, then they say, okay, these were the case. And interestingly, we see something that also very late pictures, late of like end of 19th century, early 20, in some Caucasian regions, like in Georgia and some areas where people have also small shields and with a sword, and they protect their hands almost the same way. But then again, I repeat, Romans didn't do that because they had larger shields. And also in medieval combat, sometimes you see they don't have a gauntlet, and they don't move their sword and their shield the way they did it in this sword and buckler, to use the European terminology. So there was a specific fighting style. You cannot transfer from this specific fighting style, not to the rest of European fighting arts and swordsmanship, but definitely not to the Persian. This was mostly a dueling combination. The unprotected hand is difficult to hit as protected by the shield, right? So you see that here is the shield there, and they don't move like these guys, right? You can see that clearly, right? So Bazuband is always there, right? You see that the hand is also protected, right? So there is already a shield. The unprotected hand is difficult to hit as protected by the shield. So shield plays also a role, right? That's no denial about that. Let me just say something to you. Understand the nature of war, Shamshir. This is like sneak preview. These are 3 Shamshirs in the next upcoming book I'm writing, or I've been writing on Mr. Al-Qarashi's book. I've already published last year the first volume. The second volume will be published hopefully by the end of this year. And they're from Qazvin, a private museum in Qazvin in Iran, where Mr. Al-Qarashi acquired the whole museum. There are also in this collection, there are, as you can see, Persian Shamshirs. I had in my studies, when I was in Nadiri Museum, I said that over 27 museums I analyzed. Most of them are in Iran. And there in one of them is Nadiri Museum, where I had I was honored to analyze arms and armor of Nader Shah and Afshar. And one of them was his Shamshir. And one of his Shamshir is 1,250 grams, which is published in my book, Arms and Armor from Iran. And to me, hands-on experience, that was the heaviest Shamshir I have ever had in my hands. But look at these beauties. They are there are many of them. I only put 3 of them here. between 1,250 grams to 1,450 grams, and all of them were made of Persian patterned crucible steel. I repeat, let's say 1,250 to 1,450. Let's stick to the last one, 1,450 grams. When you have them in your hand, you can see what kind of cutters they are. These are not for dueling. These are battlefield weapons. They're meant to cut. Of course, you can trust with them as well, but they can cut, and were used by infantry. They were used also by cavalry, as depicted in Persian miniatures. Hypothesis number 6 is the unprotected hand is difficult to hit as the arm is never stretched and the cuts are done with bent elbows at all times. This can be refuted easily. Look at this stretched arm. Of course they hit. Also, you can hit with the shamshir with bent arms. So always showed it to you how easy it is in the wrestling range to cut with the heavily bent or heavily curved sword as shamshir is. But you can definitely, as I have shown in cutting tests with antiques, you can also cut with an extended hand easily. And I cut tatami umote hard grain with Asadullah Shamshir and with the Kalb Ali Shamshir. You can see it on my channel. You can see that it's also Shah Ismail here, right? From Olamare Shah Ismail, which he with an extended arm. Again, extended arm, right? Look at the extension of the arm here. Look at that, even with the dropped wrist. From Tariq Jahan Goshay Nadiri, World Conquest of Nader, with the dropped wrist. Look at again from with dropped wrist cutting with the Shamshir. The last hypothesis is battlefield fighting arts differ from dueling. I mentioned that before, and it is look, okay, he's cut, he didn't succeed, he's grabbing the blade. You know, this is a point which I have come to it to realize it not some time ago, some years. I used to do lots of in historical swordsmanship and fighting, like in HEMA, did lots of sparrings, I did endurance fights, gained lots of experience, and also did armored combat. And back then I always sat and found people who do not spar, which I still believe they're missing something. And this is not, and if they say, oh, with the sharp sword, everything looks different, I thought they were looking for excuses. Look, I'm not saying sparring is not important, but you should never, ever forget, with sparring, you are doing only a simulation, right? In a real fight, many things changes. If you had, now I really agree with what some colleagues always pointed out, right? So back then, of course, I believed in it, but I still believe you need to spar, to do sparring, be it in empty-handed. You can see if someone punches or kicks, if he has never sparred or fought, you can see it clearly. The same is with weapons. You can see that some people shake and they cannot control because of the weight of the weapon, and so, or they don't have right stepping, and so you need to do it. But we should never forget that fighting with sharps was different. And on top of it, something which we should never forget, fighting in duels were different compared to fighting on battlefields. There were two different things. In duels, you might have protected yourself much more, like in armored combat. On a battlefield, if you just keep protecting yourself, you could only function for a very short and limited period of time, because the question of dehydration was there and many other factors. And I believe when you enter, and back then, when they entered the battlefield to kill, there was a completely different way of fighting with sharp weapons, because the goal was different. The goal back then was elimination, not winning a duel. Just having said that, these are the 7 hypotheses, and I have many more. Just wanted to point out and show you based on different miniatures and also historical examples. Later on, I will also, in my next book on swordsmanship, I will go into detail. I have lots of new sources, source materials on that. And I'm really thankful, as usual, to Iranian museums for wonderful cooperation with me. I wish you a nice day. Please subscribe to my channel, leave comments and like, And the best way, again, to support us is to buy my books. You can also become a patron of us and also become a member on YouTube. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day.